Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Tuesday, June 1st, 2021. On today's episode of the show, we're going to be talking about the latest film and TV news. My name is Ben Pearson. I'm the senior writer at slashfilm.com, and I'm joined on today's episode by Slash Film weekend editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
Brad, it's just you and I today. We're easing back into the week after Memorial Day weekend. Hopefully, everybody, all of our listeners out there, had a great holiday weekend. And let's just talk about a couple news items today before we wrap things up. So let's kick things off with potential sequel to Cruella, the new movie that is available right now. Brad, what's going on with that?
Yeah, so Cruella had a pretty decent weekend at the box office. Didn't do quite as well as A Quiet Place Part 2. That could very well likely be because the movie was also available on Disney Premier Access, and so people were able to see it at home instead of going out to the theater, which some people still aren't comfortable with. And so Disney hasn't necessarily officially ordered a sequel or anything like that, but director Craig Gillespie was asked about the possibility of where it might go since the movie itself does leave, this dangling thread of continuing the story of Cruella and this new form of the villain who is played by Emma Stone in this live action approach to the 101 Dalmatians character. And so the movie itself, reimagines Cruella so that she's not actually this dog hating maniac who wants to skin Dalmatians. I won't say how or anything like that, just because you can watch the movie and find out for yourself. But it does introduce the idea in a post-credit scene of potentially reframing the original 101 Dalmatian story and how we perceive of Cruella, so that she's not quite this insane person. But before we get to that, the Craig Gillespie talked about what he would like to see from a sequel. He's not contracted to do one yet or anything like that. And even though there's this hint at leading into 101 Dalmatians potentially being told again with this new Cruella, it sounds like Gillespie wants to dig more into her as a character, because he said, quote, "I feel like we've only just met her. I'd love to now see the full-blown Cruella, fully loaded. She's managed to get the support system around her, and she can really expand on her brand. I'd love to see where that takes her and how you could almost destroy her from inside out if she's not careful with all that power." So it seems like Gillespie thinks that, there's a lot more that we can explore about this character other than what we already know about her from this origin and from where we, think that maybe she's headed. And it seems like there's some room here for them to maybe play with an entirely new approach to that story, especially based on the credit scene from the movie.
Okay, so Brad, I have to admit that I watched this movie, but I did not realize that there was a post-credit scene. I totally missed that. So I'm going to ask you to spoil that now. So if our listeners are interested in watching Cruella and not having that spoiled, I would encourage you just to fast forward for a few minutes on the podcast. But I really want to get into this because I completely missed this. So hopefully this is giving people enough time to dive for your podcast device and fast forward. So now that with a full spoiler warning in place, what happens in this post-credit sequence?
So Cruella ends up giving 2 Dalmatian puppies to Anita and Roger. And these are the 2 characters from 101 Dalmatians who are the owners of Pongo and Perdita, the Dalmatian dogs who eventually have a litter of puppies after Anita and Roger meet and fall in love with each other. These 2 characters are set up to have a little bit of a history with Cruella in this movie. And so this is kind of a change of pace because Pongo and Perdita were not given to these characters as gifts by Cruella in the original 101 Dalmatians. And so along with the puppies, there's a card that's, indicates that's from Cruella, and it says, "See you soon." So she has some kind of intention to return, whether it's to maybe get these dogs after they're fully grown, or as we've seen in the original 101 Dalmatians, get the puppies that they have. But at the same time, that, assumes that Anita and Roger are going to get together and their dogs will get together and have these puppies. So there might be the possibility of her being the one who initiates this relationship between the two in order to be able to get these puppies from them.
Man, that would be pretty dastardly.
Yeah, it seems like a long way to go just to get some Dalmatian puppies. And it also raises the question because the movie makes it so that she's not this, dog killer, that she doesn't want to, skin dogs or anything like that, at least, at this point in her life. that what would she want with those puppies if that were the case? So
Yeah.
it certainly stands to shake up what we know about and I can't believe this is a phrase I'm about to say, the 101 Dalmatians mythology.
Right. Yes.
But it's clearly this is a new approach to Cruella, and so it would stand to reason that we'll get entirely different, adaptation of that original story.
Yeah, because it takes place in a different time period and all of that stuff. So I'm kind of looking at this as like an alternate history kind of thing instead of a direct. I think originally this was billed as like a 101 Dalmatians prequel, and it's like this story doesn't the story of the movie Cruella, it doesn't exactly lead into the animated movie 101 Dalmatians. The
Or the live
timeline,
action one.
right? Yeah, it's not quite as clean as that. Um, this Roger character. I remember Anita being in the movie. She has a very small role. She's a photographer. She goes to school with Cruella. She's seen as a younger kid. Is Roger even in the bulk of the movie? Did I just completely forget that character popped up at some point?
He is the Baroness's lawyer, and now
Oh,
and he becomes a composer after things go awry with her.
wow. I totally missed that in the movie. I just did not even clock that character's name was Roger at all. Okay. Well, you learn something new every day. So there's that. All right. So let's move to our next story here, which involves AMC. So, this was earlier this year, it was announced that the ArcLight cinemas in Los Angeles, which is like, that runs the Cinerama Dome, one of the most iconic theaters in the city, basically shut down. They announced that they would be closing for good, and the ArcLight right now is boarded up and on Sunset Boulevard, and nobody is going in there. No, the theater is not in operation. But AMC Theaters announced that they are actually in discussions with the landlords who own those properties. And so AMC could theoretically take over the Hollywood ArcLight, which is kind of wild to think about, especially because the ArcLight is sort of, it's one of those destination venues where quality has always been, at the very peak of performance, and it's one of those things that is clearly a major priority for everybody who works there, from keeping the place super clean and the presentation always being great, and they come out and like introduce the movie to you in person. It's basically the exact opposite of an experience that you would have walking into any mall and going to an AMC theaters walking into an AMC theater cinema, where the bulbs are often super dim and the presentation is not great and the masking is not great on the theater, and it's a little dirty and grimy and whatever. It's AMC has been wearing the crown as the biggest theater chain in the United States for a long time, and I feel like they've sort of gotten lazy at the top, and instead of pushing things forward and trying to innovate and retain that crown in the way that benefits the customers the most, I feel like they've sort of dropped the ball a little bit. So the idea of AMC taking over the ArcLight, I'm sure sends a shudder down the spine of any cinephile who lives in Los Angeles. This is not a done deal yet by any means, but AMC plans to raise $230 million to help boost the company, and there's all this GameStop stuff going on with the stock prices for AMC too. Like earlier in the year, when the whole GameStop thing on Wall Street was happening, AMC got roped into that, where the same sort of traders and investors started pumping a bunch of money into AMC. So everything seems a little chaotic and sort of in flux right now. I'm not sure how long AMC is going to be sort of flush with the kind of cash that they have right now. They said they've increased their liquidity, and with an increasingly vaccinated population and the imminent release of blockbuster new movie titles, it is time for AMC to go on the offense again. So, yeah, Brad, any thoughts on AMC being the one to potentially buy this very famous theater in LA?
Yeah, everything you said about AMC is accurate. I've been to a wide variety of them in major cities, and of course here in my smaller area in Northwest Indiana. And they're just they're essentially the McDonald's of movie theaters. And so them taking over an institution that feels like it has a little bit of class and respect for the exhibition of movies feels like a huge step down, and I think it's certainly worrisome. I personally don't have like an affinity for the ArcLight because I've only been to it a couple times when I lived in Los Angeles, and we have one here in Chicago, I think, but I've never actually been to it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I worry anytime AMC theaters is involved. I hope that maybe since there is a little bit of increasing competition because of how streaming is changing the exhibition model, that maybe they'll step their game up and turn the theatrical experience into something a little bit more worthy of our
Mhm.
time. But I simply have to wait and see.
Yeah, I'm not like psychologically fully against AMC as a company or anything. I just wish that they would step it up a little bit and sort of show the customers that they're taking this seriously, especially in the wake of the pandemic when all movie theaters in the country were hit incredibly hard. It seems like now is the time to sort of redouble your efforts if you want to put on a good face for the public and say, okay, we know you miss going to the movies. Come to our business and we'll make that the best possible experience for you. That just seems like a no-brainer kind of approach, and I have not heard anything like that from AMC recently. And the idea that they want to buy this theater, I guess theoretically could be them sort of trying to take a step in that direction. But if they, I don't know, maybe if that happens, I hope it rubs off on them in the best way, where they realize the culture that was around the ArcLight and maybe sort of try to infuse some of that culture into the rest of the AMC brand, as it were. So we'll see how it goes. But all right, so our last story today involves a potential spoiler for Spider-Man No Way Home, which is coming out this year, which is kind of wild to think about. It's coming out in December of this year. So I guess if you don't want to know anything at all about this movie, because we haven't seen a trailer or anything like that yet, although I think there is going to be one coming up pretty soon, then maybe just cut out of the podcast now. But okay, so blanket potential spoiler warning for Spider-Man No Way Home based on some reporting that's come out recently. But Brad, tell us about these rumors about who the main villain of that movie might be.
Yeah, so we already know that Spider-Man No Way Home is bringing in villains from the other Spider-Man franchises. Reports have come out about Jamie Foxx reprising his role as Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Alfred Molina coming back as Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2 that Sam Raimi directed so long ago. And those have essentially, been confirmed in various rumblings we've heard since then, including Alfred Molina himself confirming that he's coming back as Doc Ock. But we haven't heard yet who the main villain is and what the story will be and how this comes to Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But apparently on the Snyder Cut podcast, Collider reporter Jeff Snyder revealed that he has heard Willem Dafoe is returning as Norman Osborn / the Green Goblin from Sam Raimi's original Spider-Man movie in 2001. And this echoes things that we have heard recently in the rumor mill, stuff that's been circulating around online that we haven't really approached because knowing how this comes about digs into spoiler territory. But I wouldn't be surprised if we learn the basics of this plot maybe when the first trailer comes out. I'm not sure how deep they're going to dive and how they're going to tease, this introduction of the multiverse for real this time. Because as we all know, in Spider-Man Far From Home, Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio famously pretended that he was from another version of Earth and talked about the idea of the multiverse. But
Mhm.
now it's actually coming to fruition in the MCU with Spider-Man No Way Home.
Do you think that they'll actually address that, maybe even in the trailer, like have Peter Parker say, Mysterio was talking about the multiverse, but now it's real, like that kind of thing? Do you think that kind of acknowledgement is something that they're going to lean into, or do you think that could get potentially too confusing for like general audiences, and they'll keep that sort of in the within the body of the movie, so like once you're in context, you can understand all that stuff properly? Do you think they'll what kind of approach do you think they're going to take there?
I mean, I feel like they're definitely will have to do some expositional explaining of how this all works because, there's a lot of general audiences out there who love the Marvel movies, but they're not necessarily well versed with the mythology of Marvel Comics and how the multiverse operates with parallel dimensions and alternate
Hmm.
version of characters and whatnot. I wouldn't be surprised, since we know Benedict Cumberbatch is supposed to be in this movie as Doctor Strange, if there's a conversation that he has with Peter Parker where Peter Parker says, like, wait a minute, I thought this was a lie that Mysterio
Hmm.
made up. And Strange explains to him, it's like, no, there are all these, multiverses out there that are, surround our world, and maybe even a reference to WandaVision in there, if Wanda Maximoff has any place in what is happening and why these villains are coming out of these other dimensions into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is all stuff that we don't know because they've been very, very secretive, even more so, I think, than the other Spider-Man movies with what's happening in this one. And so it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. And it does make us think that they might be leading to some kind of formation of the Sinister Six, which we haven't seen come together on the big screen before.
Yeah, what do you think about the return of Willem Dafoe? I assume you enjoyed his portrayal of Norman Osborn / Green Goblin back in the day.
Oh, of course, he's a freaking maniac in that movie, and like just the expressions on his face throughout the entire movie alone are just like they're mesmerizing and horrifying all at once. I can't wait to see him come back and especially interact with Tom Holland's version of Peter Parker. I feel like it's going to be a lot of fun.
Not to retread territory that we've probably discussed before, but the addition of yet another villain here, I think, might give some listeners pause because I would say that one of the problems with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, for example, is the too many villains problem, right? Sort of spreading the story a little too thin because you have all of these masters to serve in characters that are big, like famous characters that fans care a lot about. Are you worried at all a little bit, Brad, in the pit of your stomach that you've got Doc Ock, you've got Electro, now you've got Green Goblin, you've got all these sort of factors from not only the MCU but other Spider-Man properties sort of coming in together? Are you worried at all about the way that John Watts, the director, is going to be able to sort of weave this web?
I guess a little bit, but I feel like the way that they'll probably establish these villains being a part of it they won't have the usual large arc that they have to go throughout an entire movie. I think each of them will roughly have the same goal in mind, and that's probably to prevent themselves from being killed in their own universes. Because one of the things that Alfred Molina said when he confirmed his role is that it sounds like he gets pulled out of Spider-Man 2 just before he's about to be killed in that universe. So
yeah.
I would imagine that the idea is that if they are forced to go back to their universe, that they will be killed. And so their hope is to stay alive. And of course, since they're bad guys, they're probably going to be doing plenty of things that will keep Spider-Man busy.
Awesome. All right, so yeah, Spider-Man No Way Home comes out December 17th. Brad, doesn't it seem weird that movie is coming out this year? It seems like, I mean, you said that they've done a pretty good job of keeping a tight lid on all of this stuff. It sort of feels like this movie is still, a year or two away, but it's really not. It's wild.
Yeah, I was just surprised by that recently because I had seen the rumors online of people saying, oh, there's a Spider-Man No Way Home trailer coming out. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like, there's no way it's going to be that soon. And I was like, oh, it's just a month after Eternals, and they just had their first trailer. So I guess that does make sense.
Yes. All right. Well, you can find more about all the stories that we mentioned on today's show at slashfilm.com and linked inside the show notes of this episode. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features you can find on the site. You can subscribe to this show on Apple, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all of the popular podcast apps, and send your feedback, questions, comments, and concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. Make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. Don't forget to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. Tell your friends, spread the word. Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you tomorrow.